Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're diving into one of my favorite parts of gardening, making things pretty for you. Because we're all a little bit different. We all like something a little fancy, a little simple, a little something. But no two of us are alike. What I like, you probably don't. I like this. Shades of green, different shaped leaves, foliage. That's what I like. Yes, you'll see the occasional bloom, the occasional berry, but I like green. That's what I enjoy. Making things pretty for you is what we're here to talk about today. Because gardening isn't just about growing food or keeping plants alive, though it can be. It's also about creating a space that makes you smile when you walk outside. Makes you smile, not me. So, for example, I don't like roses. I know that's sacrilege. I know. But I don't like roses. I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they smell. My ideal garden doesn't include roses, even if they were green. I don't like the way they look and I don't like the way they smell. So, something that makes you smile might not make me smile. If you like a rose garden, good for you. I love that for you. It's not for me. One of the best ways to achieve a look you enjoy is through plant combinations, putting together flowers and foliage and shapes and colors so they complement each other in a way that pleases your eye. Now, before we just go any further, I'm going to reiterate, this is incredibly personal. What looks amazing to one person might feel a little too wild to another. I love the wild, okay? I get bushes that are going to get big and bushy, and I plant them as close together as I can manage. Closer together than you're supposed to, because I like that full, beautiful look. Not everybody likes that. A lot of people like something more controlled, more planned out, and less wild. That's okay. I'm going to give you some ideas, but the fun of gardening is experimenting until you find what you love. So, color is the first thing that people notice when they come to your garden. Whether it's a single flower bed or whether it's an entire property rimmed with plants. Some gardeners love to be bold. They like dramatic contrast, like planting yellow marigolds next to purple petunias. Okay, some people love that. Those colors are opposite on the color wheel, so they pop against each other really well and they grab attention. Others prefer a softer, calming look. Maybe you like pale pink roses mixed with lavender or shades of white and silver with a splash of blue here and there. That kind of palette feels peaceful and almost dreamy. Or maybe you're like me and you like all green, where it just feels like nature has wrapped you in a warm blanket. We are all very, very different. There is no right or wrong approach here. It just really depends on the mood you want your garden to give. Bright and bold says, "Look at me," while soft and harmonious whispers, "Relax and stay a while." And something like this says, "Ooh, we're in the wilds now." So you really have to figure out what vibe is you. There's a fun trick of trying color echoes. For example, you might have a purple flower with a white flower that has a purple center. So think there are white daisies that have a purple center. Okay, so you might try mimicking. There's a bullfrog making a lot of noise over there. Like a lot of noise over there. It's really quite funny. It doesn't matter. But that's not the point. But color echoes. So use one main color, right? Maybe you pick a purple flower you enjoy, a violet. Maybe you like violets. But then I'm getting rained on. A little bit of rain. But then you like to echo that by using a daisy with a purple center so that you're pulling that purple in and kind of jazzing it up. So it's not just purple. It's not just purple. That's the sun, by the way. If you're wondering what that flash is in the corner, that's the sun. But that way you don't have this flat palette and you don't have this is purple, this is white. You have this echo through your plants, and it's quite beautiful. You might try something like a red geranium with one of the many pieces of foliage that have almost red veining shot through. So you're echoing the red. You can echo a lot of different colors. You're not matching, you're repeating enough color that the whole bed feels intentional, right? So everything kind of goes with each other, even if it doesn't match, right? So the next thing I wanted to talk about is texture. Flowers are beautiful, but don't underestimate the power of leaves. I love leaves, obviously. I'm surrounded by leaves all the time. I love them. Do not underestimate the power of foliage. Leaves can be broad or feathery or spiky, and Gwen's coming. We have Gwen now. We have Gwen. Gwen! She has kittens. Not with her. They're in the garage. But so foliage can have nice, fat, broad leaves. They can be spiky or feathery or velvety or glossy. They can reflect the light of the day or they can absorb it. It entirely depends on what you pick. Pairing different textures makes your garden feel layered and interesting, even when nothing is blooming. I like to have the green as long as possible, so I pick things that are going to stay green, though some things are changing color now because it's fall. But I like to have the green as long as possible. So you'll notice that I even have some, they're small, but some evergreens that will pop up eventually and kind of fill in that space in the winter so we have green for longer. But it's taking a while because this is not a naturally evergreen area. So it's taking a while, but we're working on it. But when it comes to your foliage, imagine big, smooth leaves from, for example, a hosta. Hostas are beautiful. Paired with the delicate fern-like dill, for example, which is an herb. Yes, I know, but you can eat your plants, a lot of them, not all of them. But there's nothing wrong with using an edible plant as something pretty. You just eat it later. It's fine. You might also think lamb's ear, which is, if you don't know what lamb's ear looks like, beautiful. There it is. Lamb's ear is really pretty. We have some up front. Just little now, but it'll get bigger. But lamb's ear is soft and silvery. It's kind of fuzzy. It's actually really cool. But you might want to plant that around your beautiful irises, right? You might want to do something like that and get a lot of stuff going that way. So think about the foliage and how you might be able to bring that in to your garden. Now, form matters too, because plants grow in different shapes. You have upright and spiky, like your snapdragons. We have snapdragons up front because they're my dad's favorite thing. And you also have things that are like rounded, like your zinnias. Zinnias are quite round. And you have things that are kind of trailing, like your creeping thymes. Putting these forms together is like arranging furniture. You don't want everything to be the same shape. You want unless you're looking for true uniformity, you want some variety. So plant things that have not just different foliage, not just different flowers, but a different shape to them. Okay? Because a bed with only round mounds can feel really flat and boring. But throw in some vertical spikes and a few plants that tumble over the edge, and suddenly the bed feels alive. And that makes all the difference. Now, one of the easiest design rules in gardening is tall in the back, medium in the middle, short in the front. Right? That's how you do it. It's simple, but it works. So sunflowers are hollyhocks. They're tall and striking, great for the back of the bed. Something like coneflowers are a good middle ground because they're not super big. Zinnias, black-eyed Susans, those are kind of your middle of the road plants where they have some height, but they're not raw, right? And then at the front, you might look into pansies or your creeping thymes, or I can hear a raccoon now. And a bunch of birds. Awesome. It's coming into fall. The animals are all awake and moving around. And the dog is going to make the raccoon go away. That's a thing. We're not going to worry about it. So you can layer your plants tall, medium, small, and it kind of gives you a sense of depth. It moves your one-dimensional bed to multiple dimensions. It's beautiful that way. But layering isn't just about height. When we talk about layering, we always talk about big, medium, small. But there's another factor, and that's bloom times. If your tall plant only flowers in the spring, consider what is going to carry the load, so to speak, in summer. Maybe something tall in the spring, and then hollyhocks will bloom later, and then zinnias fill in the middle all summer long. Try to think about when your plants, the plants that you like, actually bloom. So sunflowers are at their height towards the end of summer and early fall. You have something like a hollyhock that is kind of midsummer. Zinnias that are happy to bloom right up until they start thinking it's too cold out, and then they give up. It gets cold early here, so they don't last long. But this way your garden has something that you can look at from spring through fall. So when you're pairing your plants, don't just think, I like these two plants. Check when they flower, and if you love those plants, you probably already know. So pick some things that flower at different times and scatter them throughout so that there's always something pretty to look at. And don't forget to sprinkle in some of your food crops. If you love the way squash plants come over the edge of your bed and drape onto the ground and then grow beautiful fruit, if you like the way that looks, use a squash plant as part of your pretty bed, right? Use them in your flower beds. You can eat the squash later. It's not a big deal. If you love how pepper plants look, don't be afraid to throw a few in there. You do not have to keep a flower bed and a food garden separate. You can mix and match. Okay, just make sure you know what's where. Just take some pictures or make a chart, whatever. But keep track of what you put where. You can absolutely mix and match. That's why the front of the house is so full of things right now, because I put a little of everything there. I have, don't know what that was, whatever. But I have tomatoes next to snapdragons because that's what I wanted. If you like the way it looks, then it's good enough. Okay? Now, a single plant can be lovely, and we all have our favorite plants. I love daisies. We all have our favorites. But groups of 3 or more usually make a strong statement. Okay? And this works in 2 ways. First of all, don't have just one daisy. Have 3 or 5. Odd numbers, for some reason, odd numbers look really good. So have 3 or 5, right? It works really well. The other thing you might want to do is when you are grouping your plants, group them in 3 or 5. So groups of 3 or 5 of different plants. So don't put just 2 different flowers in that flower bed, put 3. Okay? Just because it makes a huge difference in just how attractive the bed is. Okay? Because one marigold, for example, could look lonely. 3 or 5 planted together is suddenly a splash of color. Repetition is another trick. If you repeat the same groups of plants in 2 or 3 places around your property, it suddenly looks like you had a plan. It ties the whole thing together. So if you really like planting, I don't know, maybe you like lamb's ear with daisies and pick something else you might really love to put with that. Maybe you like violets. I like violets. That's why I keep bringing up violets. But maybe that's your grouping of 3. Repeat that in more than one spot. So don't just have that by your front door. Have that on the back deck. That way it looks like there was a plan. And there was a plan. If you did that deliberately, there was a plan. Bug flew up my nose a few minutes ago. That's fun. But it just kind of ties everything together and makes it look like you had a plan. Your eye naturally bounces from one spot to the next anyway. So if it starts to see consistency instead of randomness, the garden starts to feel intentional. Okay. Now, gardens are always intentional because you have to go plant them, but it looks like there was intent, and there obviously was intent if you kind of figure out how to repeat the groupings that you've already made. You can also create specimen plantings. One special plant that stands out, surrounded by similar companions. A good example is a hydrangea. Everyone loves hydrangeas. They're gorgeous. And you could do a skirt of hostas underneath. You might do a Japanese maple, for example. You don't exclude trees. Trees are great in your gardens. So you might do a Japanese maple, and around it you might do a bed of lamb's ear. It's very pretty. That special plant becomes the star of the show, and everything else is the supporting cast. And one main thing gardeners forget is that plants bloom at different times. If you only plan for spring, your garden might look fantastic in April and then kind of in July. So again, we're going to talk about bloom times. I know we already did, but we're going to do it again. Combining plants with different bloom times and interesting foliage makes all the difference. So if you know that this plant only blooms in the spring, but you still love the look of its leaves, plant it anyway, because then at least you still have something beautiful to look at. So a good example of bloom times and a rotation you might choose is daffodils and tulips bloom in the spring, right? Daffodils and tulips, that's their time. But by summer, they're, right? So by the time they fade, you might have irises and peonies ready to take over. Later in the summer, you're looking at things like petunias and zinnias. I like zinnias as well. And maybe marigolds keeps that color coming back again. And in fall, then you have your asters and your chrysanthemums and things like that. But never forget the foliage. When in doubt, buy yourself some greenery that you can plant in your beds and stuff it in there. It'll give you something interesting to look at between blooms, or in the event that everything decides it's not going to bloom this year. That happens, especially if you have perennials or biennials. So, yeah. Even when nothing is blooming, though, that foliage can really carry the show. So think about some foliage has that white silvery of lamb's ear. There are plants that have burgundy leaves. You might have the hostas that have those nice big leaves that are green, but they're shot through with other colors. The colors don't depend on flowers, so they give you interest all season long. Do not forget the greenery. Okay, greenery is often overlooked. We often go, "Oh, I love these flowers. They're so pretty, so colorful," and they are so colorful. But if you throw in some greenery, you'll thank yourself later. So now let's look at some overall styles. The pictures you saw earlier kind of highlight a few different styles. So one of the things I like is desert gardens. In hot, dry regions, these guys can really give you a variation in color and form. Think cactus, right? They're pretty, they flower, they're nice. But if you live in a very an area without water, basically a very drought-prone region, you kind of need to work with what you've got. So don't forget that even the driest areas do have some plants that thrive. Maybe prickly pear or yucca. These can create drama without ever blooming. They're beautiful plants. The shapes themselves are the decorations, so don't forget about them. Maybe you live in a very shaded area. Sometimes you don't have full sun, but you can still make something beautiful. Think ground covers with the deep purples that don't need as much sun. Maybe you can get some bigger bloom plants. Check your nursery. They'll have full shade plants. These things, and some of them are brightly colored, so they can kind of brighten up those dark spots on your property. See what your garden center has. Shade gardening is all about contrast in leaf shape and color because there is a lot of shadow. So try to get things that look very different from each other if you're planting a garden in a shady spot where the colors won't stand out as much. Then just rely on shape and form. There's enough things that have different shapes and form to get you through it. Then there are cottage gardens. That's what I would call ours. These are organized chaos. Okay, they look wild and unkempt. They're not. Like this looks incredibly wild. What you don't know is this is also, I was getting a whole bunch of plums out of here because I have fruit trees in here. So it looks wild and chaotic, but they're not. Cottage gardens have a ton of different flowers all growing together, layered and lush, and tend to focus on the greenery. So yes, you'll see our lilacs bloom when the lilacs bloom, but the focus is the greenery, the insane amount of greenery that we use. So you'll have things like foxgloves towering over, if you like them, roses. I am not a fan. We have some wild roses, which are fine. I'm going to put in a rose bush for my mom, but other than that, I'm not a rose fan. But you might be. So, foxgloves over roses is really pretty. Daisies spilling out, that's what I do. I've got daisies. You'll notice, well, not now. They're past their bloom. But the daisies run down this way, and we've got daisies over there. I love daisies. Daisies are everywhere. But you also might have herbs tucked here and there. Label them so you know, so you can grab them for dinner. But use your herbs. They give nice fragrance, so when you're walking by your plants, you can smell them. And it's also really nice to just be able to grab some oregano or some mint and go chow down. Also, you might want to think about harmonious gardens. Instead of contrast, some gardeners prefer harmony. Lots of plants in similar shades. I would say I'm a mix of cottage and harmonious because I do like mainly greens. But you might think of pale blues or lavenders or whites. The overall effect is calm, like stepping into a watercolor painting, if you try to keep things all in the same color family. Each style has its charm. Each one has people who love it and people who hate it. You might like a bold, wild cottage look, or maybe you're drawn to the clean, restful feel of a harmonious garden. We like things a little wild. I find it easier to keep, and I just love spending time in a garden that's a little wild instead of something that is more manicured. So again, it's really, really personal. At the end of the day, gardening isn't about following strict rules. It's about creating a space that makes you happy. Play with the colors, mix your textures, experiment with groupings, and don't be afraid to change your mind. Gardens aren't static. They evolve with every season, every new plant, and every new idea you try. So you can always do something different next year. If you didn't love what you did this year, revisit it in the spring. No big deal. It's easy to change it up. You just plant something different in the spring. No big deal. Well, that is going to be about it for me here today at Andersen Acres. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What plant combinations have you tried that really worked for you? Or maybe ones that didn't. Sometimes the oops moments teach us the most. Thanks for joining me here tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.